I'm Mia 29, and I never imagined my pregnancy with twins would end with me homeless in the pouring rain. For months, my mother-in-law Evelyn had been undermining me in the home she shared with my husband James and me. That stormy night, she finally showed her true colours, forcing me out, while my own husband stood silent. 6 months later, the same woman was on her knees begging to see my beautiful daughters. The way I responded left her truly speechless. Before I continue this unbelievable story, drop a comment. Letting me know where you're watching from, hit the subscribe button, and brace yourself for what happened when I finally stood up to the woman who tried to destroy my family. Meeting James felt like something straight out of a romance movie. I was 25 attending my college friend's summer barbecue when I spotted him across the yard. Tall with kind eyes and an infectious laugh, he was helping the host set up the grill. Our eyes locked, and within minutes we were deep in conversation about everything from our favourite hiking trails to our shared love of historical documentaries. "You're different," he told me that night as he walked me to my car. "Most people don't really listen when I talk about my passion for architectural preservation." I laughed. "Well, most people don't get excited when I talk about my collection of vintage cameras either." Our connection was immediate and intense. Within weeks, we were inseparable. James worked for a prestigious architectural firm following his passion for historic building restoration. I was a graphic designer for a small marketing agency, creating visual stories for clients. We complemented each other perfectly, his analytical mind balancing my creative spirit. The only shadow in our sunny beginning was when James mentioned his mother. "She's been alone since Dad died 10 years ago," he explained over dinner one night. "We're extremely close. She sacrificed everything for me." I nodded, thinking it was sweet how he cared for his widowed mother. I'd lost my father young too, so I understood that bond. What I didn't understand yet was the difference between healthy attachment and unhealthy enmeshment. Meeting Evelyn should have been my first warning. She lived in a sprawling Victorian home in the historic district, the kind of place that made my modest apartment look like a closet. When James brought me to Sunday dinner, she greeted me with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "James has told me so little about you," she said, looking me up and down, as if assessing a purchase she wasn't sure about returning. "Mother, that's not true," James protested weakly. "I've told you all about Mia's design work and her amazing eye for detail." Evelyn merely hummed in response before turning to James. "Darling, you look thin. Have you been eating properly?" Throughout dinner, she peppered our conversation with subtle digs. "Oh, graphic design. I suppose that's creative, though. Not terribly stable, is it?" And James always brought home such accomplished young women in college, doctors and lawyers mostly. James either didn't notice or chose to ignore these comments. When I mentioned them in the car ride home, he sighed. "She's just protective. She'll warm up once she gets to know you." But she never did warm up. If anything, as our relationship deepened, Evelyn's subtle hostility intensified. She'd call James multiple times during our dates with emergencies that usually amounted to needing help resetting her internet router or opening a jar. He always jumped to attention sometimes, leaving me midway through dinner. Despite these red flags, I fell deeply in love with James. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and treated me with respect and adoration, at least when his mother wasn't around. After a year of dating, he proposed during a sunset hike to our favourite overlook. I said yes, without hesitation. That's when the real battle began. Evelyn insisted on helping with the wedding plans, which quickly translated to taking over entirely. My dream of a simple, intimate ceremony in a botanical garden was dismissed as cheap and unrefined. Instead, Evelyn pushed for a lavish church wedding with hundreds of guests, mostly her friends and business associates. "James needs to maintain certain appearances," she explained when I objected. "His firm's partners will be attending. You do want to support his career, don't you?" James avoided the conflict entirely. "Let's just keep Mum happy, he'd say. "It's easier that way." By the time our wedding day arrived, it barely resembled anything I'd wanted. I walked down the aisle past 200 strangers in a dress Evelyn had selected because mine was too bohemian. During the reception, she introduced me to guests as James's bride, never by my name. After the honeymoon, I tried repeatedly to build a relationship with Evelyn. I invited her to lunch, asked about her charity work, even offered to help digitize her old family photos. Each attempt was met with polite dismissal or outright rejection. "I'm quite busy with the hospital board this week," she'd say. Or, "Those old photos are too precious for amateur handling." James and I settled into a cozy apartment downtown, close to both our jobs. We talked about starting a family, but agreed to wait until we could buy a house in a good school district. For 2 years, we saved diligently toward that goal. I took on freelance projects on weekends, and James worked toward a promotion. We were happy building our life together brick by brick. Then came the economic downturn. James's firm lost a major client, and suddenly there were layoffs. Despite his talent and dedication, James was among those let go. Simply because he had less seniority than others, he was devastated. "I've never failed at anything before," he confessed, sitting shell-shocked on our couch after coming home early with his things in a box. For 3 months, James searched for new positions while I took on extra freelance work to cover our expenses. Our savings dwindled rapidly. The stress began affecting our relationship. Small disagreements escalated into arguments, and the future we'd planned seemed to be slipping away. That's when Evelyn made her offer. "This is nonsense," she declared during one of our increasingly rare Sunday dinners at her house. "You're draining your savings on that overpriced apartment when there's plenty of room here. Move in temporarily until James finds a suitable position." I immediately tensed at the suggestion, but before I could respond, James was thanking his mother profusely. "That would be such a relief, Mom. Just until I'm back on my feet." Later, I tried to express my concerns. "Living with your mother might be challenging for our marriage," I suggested gently. "Maybe we could find a cheaper apartment instead." "It's just temporary," James insisted. 3 months max. And think of how much we'll save toward our house down payment." Reluctantly, I agreed. 3 months seemed manageable, and truthfully, our financial situation was becoming dire. We gave notice on our apartment, sold some furniture that wouldn't fit in Evelyn's house, and packed the rest. Those promised 3 months turned into 6, then 8. James found a new position at a smaller firm, but Evelyn convinced him it made financial sense to continue living with her while rebuilding our savings. The power dynamic in our marriage shifted subtly but unmistakably once we were under her roof. Evelyn established house rules that always seemed to inconvenience me specifically. The laundry room couldn't be used after 7 p.m. because the noise disrupted her sleep, despite her bedroom being on the opposite side of the large house from the laundry room. This rule conveniently took effect after she noticed I often did laundry in the evenings after work. My cooking schedule was restricted because certain food smells gave her migraines. My home office setup in the guest room was cluttering a space that might be needed for actual guests. Even the temperature of the house was kept uncomfortably warm because Evelyn had circulation issues. James, who had once been my partner in all things, increasingly deferred to his mother's opinions and preferences. "It's her house, Mia," became his standard response to my frustrations. We need to respect that. What had been a strong equal partnership began deteriorating into a dynamic where I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own life. The vibrant, confident woman I had been was slowly being eroded by constant criticism and undermining. But worse was still to come. The day I discovered I was pregnant should have been one of the happiest moments of our lives. James and I had been trying for a few months, hoping a baby might rekindle the connection that had been fading between us. When the second pink line appeared on the test, I felt a surge of joy and hope. James was genuinely excited when I told him, picking me up and spinning me around in our bedroom. "I'm going to be a dad," he kept saying in disbelief. For that moment, we were united again, making plans and dreaming about our future as parents. Then came the moment we shared the news with Evelyn over dinner. I'd hoped, perhaps naively, that a grandchild might soften her toward me. Instead, she offered a thin smile and a tepid, "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." "Tandy, I'd say that's." After a painfully silent moment, she added, "I do hope you've thought this through financially, James. Children are enormously expensive, and your position at the new firm isn't nearly as secure as your previous one." James's smile faltered. "We've been saving, Mom, and Mia can work from home after the baby comes." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "How convenient for her." The implied criticism was clear. She thought I'd gotten pregnant to avoid working. Nothing could have been further from the truth. I loved my career and had already been researching how to balance freelance design work with parenthood. The first trimester was difficult. Morning sickness hit me hard, lasting well beyond morning hours. There were days I could barely keep water down, let alone food. My doctor was concerned about my weight loss and dehydration, prescribing anti-nausea medication and recommending plenty of rest. Evelyn viewed my illness as a personal inconvenience. "When I was pregnant with James, I never took a single day off work," she'd comment while finding me resting on the couch. Some women simply have a flair for the dramatic. At 12 weeks, we went for our first major ultrasound. Both James and I stared in shock at the screen as the technician pointed out not one, but 2 tiny heartbeats. "Congratulations," she said cheerfully. "You're having twins." James gripped my hand tightly, his face a mixture of joy and terror. Twins hadn't been on our radar at all. 2 babies meant double everything. Double the diapers, double the equipment, double the college funds eventually, but also double the tiny hands and first smiles. "Twins run in my family," I explained to the technician. "My grandmother was a twin." When we shared the news with Evelyn, her response was predictably self-centered. "Well, that certainly complicates things. This house isn't set up for 2 infants. All that crying will disturb my sleep terribly." James tried to smooth things over. "We'll start looking for our own place soon, Mum. Now that we know it's twins, we'll need the extra space." But finding affordable housing for a growing family proved difficult on our still recovering finances. James's new job paid less than his previous position, and the added medical expenses of a twin pregnancy strained our budget further. Meanwhile, my pregnancy became increasingly difficult. At 16 weeks, my doctor diagnosed me with hyperemesis gravidarum, severe, persistent nausea and vomiting that required occasional IV fluids and additional medications. She also found early signs of pregnancy-induced hypertension, putting me at risk for preeclampsia. "You need to reduce stress and get adequate rest," she emphasized during one appointment where James had been too busy to accompany me. "Twin pregnancies are already higher risk. These complications make it essential that you take care of yourself." But rest was nearly impossible in Evelyn's house. She seemed to take my pregnancy complications as a personal affront, as if I was deliberately making myself ill to inconvenience her. "I've been reading about this hyperemesis condition," she announced one morning as I emerged from the bathroom after being sick for the 3rd time. "It says here that it's often psychosomatic. Perhaps if you occupied yourself with something productive instead of dwelling on your nausea." James was working longer hours to compensate for his lower salary, leaving me alone with Evelyn most evenings. She took full advantage of his absence to undermine me in countless small ways. When my mother sent a package of handmade baby blankets, one pink, one blue, since we didn't know the genders yet, Evelyn accidentally used the blue one to line her cat's bed. When my friend dropped off pregnancy books, they mysteriously disappeared, only to be found weeks later in the garage, where someone must have placed them by mistake. At 20 weeks, we converted the rarely used study into a nursery. I'd spent hours researching space-efficient furniture for twins, creating a design that would accommodate 2 cribs while maximizing the limited square footage. The day after James and I finalized the layout, I returned from a doctor's appointment to find Evelyn had rearranged everything. "I've raised a child successfully," she informed me when I questioned the changes. "You haven't. The window creates too much draft for the cribs and babies should never face the door. It's bad feng shui." I tried to stand my ground. "Thank you for your input, Evelyn, but James and I already decided on the arrangement." Her eyes narrowed. "This is still my house, dear. I'm merely trying to help, given your limited experience." When James came home, I expected him to support our original plan. Instead, he shrugged. "Mom's raised a baby before Mia. Maybe she has a point about the draft." It was a small battle lost in a larger war, but each surrender chipped away at my autonomy as a mother-to-be. The pregnancy progressed with increasing tension. At 22 weeks, we learned we were having girls. I was thrilled immediately thinking of names. James and I had previously discussed naming our children after beloved family members. "I'd like to name one of them after my dad," I told James that night. "Elizabeth, after his middle name, Elias. We could call her Ellie." He seemed supportive, but when the topic came up at dinner, Evelyn was aghast. "Family names should come from the father's side," she declared. "It's tradition. I've always imagined my first granddaughter would be named Margaret after my mother." "We're considering all options," James said diplomatically, while I sat in stunned silence. We hadn't discussed naming either baby Margaret. Later, I found Evelyn had created a list of suitable names from the Hamilton family and left it prominently on the kitchen counter. Margaret topped the list, followed by other names from James's family tree. Not a single name from my family was included when I started keeping a pregnancy journal to document my thoughts for the twins to read. Someday it vanished after just a week of writing. Evelyn claimed to have tidied up and must have thrown it away by mistake. The convenient timing, right after I'd written about my frustrations with her behaviour, seemed suspiciously deliberate. As my belly grew, so did Evelyn's attempts to claim ownership of my pregnancy. She referred to the twins as our babies when speaking to her friends. At a dinner party she hosted, she introduced me to her bridge club as our surrogate, as if I were merely the vessel carrying her grandchildren rather than their mother. Mother? James finally objected after that particular comment. Mia is your daughter-in-law, not a surrogate. Evelyn laughed it off as a silly joke that everyone had misunderstood. But the message was clear in her mind. These babies belonged more to her than to me. By my 6th month, my health had deteriorated further. My blood pressure remained consistently elevated, and the doctor had put me on modified bed rest. I was allowed to work from my laptop, but needed to stay off my feet as much as possible and avoid stress. An impossible prescription in Evelyn's house. During this difficult time, I reached out more to my own mother, who lived 3 states away. Our daily phone calls became my lifeline, a reminder that somewhere someone cared about me as a person, not just as an incubator for grandchildren. When I mentioned possibly having my mother visit to help after the twins were born, Evelyn overheard and was livid. "This house is already overcrowded," she snapped. "Besides, I'll be here to help. You don't need your mother undermining my experience with conflicting advice." The controlling behavior escalated when I discovered Evelyn had been reading my text messages while I napped. I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter and she'd taken the opportunity to scroll through my conversations, including those with my mother, where I'd vented about living conditions. "If you're unhappy here, perhaps you should find somewhere else to live," she suggested icily when I confronted her about the invasion of privacy. "James understands the sacrifices I've made to accommodate you both." But the final straw came when I overheard Evelyn on the phone with her sister discussing baby names. "No, we've decided against Elizabeth," she was saying confidently. "It's going to be Margaret and Victoria, proper names with family history. Mia's family doesn't have the same lineage to consider." I'd never agreed to either name. In fact, James and I hadn't finalized our decisions at all, yet here was Evelyn dictating my daughter's identities before they were even born. That night, I tried again to make James understand how his mother's behavior was affecting me. "I feel like I'm disappearing in this house," I explained, tears streaming down my face. "Like I'm just a temporary inconvenience until she can have her son and granddaughters to herself." James sighed heavily. "You're being oversensitive, Mia. It's the pregnancy hormones making everything seem worse than it is. Mum is just excited about the babies." His dismissal hurt worse than Evelyn's direct attacks. My husband, the man who had once loved me for my strength and independence, now viewed me as emotionally unstable and irrational. I went to bed that night feeling utterly alone, cradling my swollen belly and whispering promises to my daughters. "I'll protect you both," I vowed quietly, "no matter what it takes." I had no idea how soon that promise would be tested. The night that changed everything began with dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Weather forecasters had been predicting the worst thunderstorm of the season, and by evening, lightning was already flashing in the distance. The air felt heavy with humidity and tension, both outside and within the walls of Evelyn's Victorian house. I'd spent most of the day in the nursery organising tiny clothes and assembling a mobile my mother had sent. My back ached constantly now, and my ankles were swollen despite the compression socks my doctor had recommended. At 26 weeks pregnant with twins, every movement required effort. Around 6 o'clock, James called to say he'd be working late again. A project deadline had been moved up and the whole team needed to put in extra hours. It wasn't the first time, but his absence meant another evening alone with Evelyn. "I'm sorry, babe," he said, sounding genuinely regretful. "Try to get some rest, okay? Dr. Chen said your blood pressure was still too high yesterday." "I know," I sighed, rubbing my belly as one of the twins delivered a particularly strong kick. "I'll be fine. Just don't stay too late." I decided to retreat to the guest room, our bedroom, for the evening, planning to read and maybe watch something on my laptop. Passing the kitchen, I noticed Evelyn preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner for one complete with her fine china and a bottle of expensive wine. "Are you expecting company?" I asked, attempting polite conversation. She barely glanced up. "No, just because I'm alone doesn't mean I can't maintain certain standards." The implied criticism wasn't lost on me. I often ate simple meals on regular plates when James worked late. Apparently this too was a character flaw in Evelyn's eyes. I made myself a sandwich and headed upstairs, too tired for another pointless battle. The storm was picking up outside rain now, lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled overhead. I settled in bed with my book, trying to ignore both the storm and the ache in my lower back. Around 8 o'clock, I heard the front door open and James's voice. He was home early after all. Smiling, I set my book aside and was about to call out when I heard Evelyn's sharp tone from downstairs. "This cannot continue, James. I've reached my limit." Their voices carried clearly through the old house's heating vent near my bed. I knew I should announce my presence, but something in Evelyn's tone made me hesitate. "Mom, please. Not tonight. I'm exhausted." James sounded worn down. "Then when?" Evelyn demanded. "After those babies arrive and this house becomes a chaotic nursery, after she's established herself so permanently that we can never reclaim our family home." My heart began pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "This is about Mia's pregnancy journal, isn't it?" James asked. "She told me you threw it away. Mum, that was important to her." "This is about much more than some silly diary," Evelyn snapped. "It's about the future of this family, our family. James, she's systematically pushing me out of my role in your life and trying to minimize my influence with my granddaughters." "That's not true," James protested, but his defense sounded weak even to my ears. "It absolutely is. She wants to name one of the twins after her father, a man none of us even knew. She constantly calls her mother for advice instead of consulting me. And have you seen how she's decorated the nursery? There isn't a single item reflecting our family heritage." I sat frozen, barely breathing, as I listened to Evelyn's distorted view of reality. The nursery contained several Hamilton family items, including a blanket Evelyn's mother had made and a rocking chair that had been in their family for generations. "You need to make a decision, James," Evelyn continued, her voice hardening. "Who comes first in your life, the family that raised and supported you for 29 years, or the woman you've known for barely 4? The silence that followed felt endless. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for my husband to defend me, to defend our marriage and unborn children. "You know I love you, Mom," he finally said. "But Mia is my wife. We're having twins. I can't just..." "Can't just what? Put your family first." Evelyn's voice rose. "This arrangement was supposed to be temporary. Now I'm trapped in my own home, watching that woman take over, making demands, critiquing how I run my household. And you've changed since meeting her. You never would have spoken to me this way before she came along." "I'm not a child anymore, Mother," James said, a rare note of firmness in his voice. "Mia isn't controlling me. If anything..." He trailed off. "If anything, what?" Evelyn pressed. "If anything, sometimes I think you're the one who can't accept that I have my own life now." I heard something slam, perhaps Evelyn's hand on a table. "How dare you? After everything I've sacrificed for you. Your father's been gone 15 years, James. 15 years I've devoted solely to you and your happiness. I know Mum and I appreciate..." "No, you clearly don't appreciate anything. You bring this woman into our lives, let her get pregnant before you're financially stable, and then expect me to stand by while she takes over my home and turns you against me." I couldn't listen anymore. With shaking hands, I pushed myself off the bed and made my way to the top of the stairs. I could see them now in the foyer below. Evelyn red-faced and gesturing wildly, James looking defeated with his shoulders slumped. "I can hear you both upstairs," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. They both looked up, startled. Evelyn recovered first, her expression shifting from anger to a thin veneer of concern. "Mia dear, you should be resting. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me," I repeated, descending the stairs carefully, one hand on the railing, the other cradling my belly. "You're discussing me, my children, and my marriage. It absolutely concerns me." James looked uncomfortable, caught between his mother and his wife. "Mia, Mum and I were just having a discussion about living arrangements." "I heard exactly what you were discussing," I replied, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "I heard Evelyn giving you an ultimatum about choosing between us, and I heard your hesitation, James." Evelyn stepped forward. "Now see here, Mia. Private conversations between a mother and son are not for you to eavesdrop on and then distort." "I wasn't eavesdropping. Your voices carry in this house, something you know very well when you've commented on hearing James and me talking in our room." I turned to James, searching his face for the man I'd fallen in love with. "Is that really how you see our life together, as me trapping you with this pregnancy, as me trying to come between you and your mother?" "Of course not," he said, but his eyes shifted away from mine. "Mum is just concerned about how quickly things have changed. We need to be more considerate of her feelings since we're living in her home." "More considerate," I echoed in disbelief. "James, I've spent 6 months walking on eggshells in this house. I've had my privacy invaded, my possessions accidentally destroyed, and my role as the mother of our children constantly undermined. And now I find out you've been listening to her twisted version of events instead of seeing what's happening with your own eyes." Evelyn made a scoffing sound. "So dramatic. This is exactly what I was talking about, James. Everything becomes a crisis with her." Something inside me snapped. Months of suppressed anger and hurt came flooding to the surface. "You want to talk about drama, Evelyn? Let's discuss how you've been systematically trying to erase me from this family since the day James introduced us. Let's talk about how you've manipulated every situation to make me the villain and yourself the victim. I will not be spoken to this way in my own house." Evelyn's voice rose to a shout. "And I will not be treated like an incubator for your grandchildren." I matched her volume, feeling my face flush with anger. "These are my babies, mine and James, not yours to name, not yours to claim, not yours to use as pawns in your twisted game to control your son." Evelyn's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little nobody. James could have married anyone. Doctors, lawyers, women from good families. Instead, he brought home a graphic designer from nowhere special with no connections and mediocre prospects. You should be thanking me for accepting you at all." "Mother!" James finally interjected, but it was too little too late. "Accept me," I laughed bitterly. "You've never accepted me. You've tolerated me at best, and only because James gave you no choice. But let's be honest, Evelyn. No woman would ever be good enough for your precious son because you don't want him to have a wife. You want him to remain your little boy forever." Lightning flashed outside, momentarily illuminating the foyer with harsh white light. Thunder followed immediately, the storm now directly overhead. "James," Evelyn said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I want her out of this house, now." "Mom, it's pouring outside. Mia's pregnant. Be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Evelyn's laugh was harsh. "I've been reasonable for 2 years. I've watched you throw away your potential for this woman. I've opened my home to her. I've endured her disrespect and ingratitude. My patience is gone." She turned to me, eyes cold. "You have 30 minutes to pack your essential belongings and leave. The rest can be collected later." I stared at her in shock, then looked to James. Surely now he would stand up to his mother. Surely now he would choose his wife and unborn children. "Mum, please," he began, but his tone was pleading rather than commanding. "Where is she supposed to go?" "That's not my concern," Evelyn replied. "She has friends, doesn't she? Or that mother she's constantly calling to complain about me." I felt something shift inside me. Not the babies, but something deeper. A realization that the man I'd married was not the partner I'd thought him to be. That he would not protect me or our daughters when it truly mattered. "Don't bother, James," I said quietly. "Your mother has made her choice, and so have you." I turned and climbed the stairs slowly, each step requiring enormous effort. In our bedroom, I grabbed my overnight bag and filled it with essentials. Medication, prenatal vitamins, a change of clothes, my laptop and chargers. I added the ultrasound pictures and the one baby outfit I'd bought myself, tiny sleepers with stars on them. James appeared in the doorway as I was zipping the bag. "Mia, don't do this. Stay. I'll talk to Mum when she's calmer." I looked at him standing there. My husband, the father of my children, a man allowing his pregnant wife to be thrown out into a thunderstorm rather than stand up to his mother. "There's nothing left to say, James. You've made your choice very clear." I lifted my bag. "I'll contact you about collecting the rest of my things." He followed me downstairs, still making weak protests. "Where will you go? At least let me drive you." "I'll call a rideshare," I replied, pulling on my raincoat. My phone already had 3 missed calls from Sophia, my best friend. She'd been texting earlier about the storm and was probably checking on me. Evelyn stood by the front door, arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction as I prepared to leave. "I think this is for the best," she said. "You'll see eventually, James. She was never right for our family." I paused at the door, looking her directly in the eyes. "You haven't won anything, Evelyn. You've just lost your son and any relationship with your granddaughters." With that, I stepped out into the pouring rain. The wind immediately whipped my coat around my legs, and lightning cracked overhead. I made it to the covered bus shelter at the end of the block before the contractions started. Doubled over in pain, I called Sophia. "I need help," I managed between gasps. "I'm at the bus stop near James's mother's house." "Mia, what's happening?" Her voice was sharp with concern. "Evelyn kicked me out. I'm having contractions. It's too early, Sophia. The babies can't come now." "Stay where you are." "I'm coming to get you," she said firmly. "And Mia, call an ambulance if they get worse before I arrive." I huddled on the bench soaked, despite the shelter's roof timing the contractions with my phone. 5 minutes apart. Too close. Too early. I was only 26 weeks along, barely past the viability threshold for twins. As I sat there watching rain pour down and feeling my body betray me with each painful contraction, I made a promise to my unborn daughters. If we get through this, I will never let anyone treat us that way again. We deserve better, all three of us. Sophia's headlights appeared through the curtain of rain 15 minutes later. She helped me into her car, concern etched on her face when she saw my condition. Hospital, now, I managed through gritted teeth. Something's wrong. As we pulled away, I looked back at Evelyn's house. James stood in an upstairs window watching. He didn't come after me. He didn't try to stop us. In that moment, something broke inside me, and something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. The emergency room staff rushed me into triage the moment Sophia helped me through the doors. My soaking clothes left puddles on the hospital floor as a nurse quickly took my vitals. Blood pressure, 160/100, she called out to the attending physician. Pregnant with twins, 26 weeks gestation contractions 5 minutes apart. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and efficient movements, immediately ordered an IV with magnesium sulfate to stop the contractions and steroids to speed up the baby's lung development in case of premature delivery. We need to stabilize you, she explained, placing a hand on my shoulder. The stress and exposure you've experienced tonight have triggered preterm labor. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. As they worked around me, hooking up monitors and medication, I felt disconnected from the chaos. All I could think about were my daughters, those tiny lives inside me, who needed more time to grow. More time that my mother-in-law's cruelty had tried to steal from them. Sophia stayed by my side, holding my hand through each contraction until the medication finally began to take effect. Hours later, the doctor confirmed that the immediate danger had passed. The contractions have stopped, but you're showing clear signs of preeclampsia, she explained. I'm admitting you for observation. At minimum, you'll need to stay overnight, possibly longer. When she asked about my home situation, I broke down the events of the night, pouring out between sobs. The doctor's expression darkened as I explained being thrown out into a storm while 6 months pregnant with twins. Do you have somewhere safe to go after discharge? She asked gently. I looked at Sophia, who immediately nodded. My spare room is yours for as long as you need it, she said without hesitation. The doctor made notes in my chart. I'm putting you on modified bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Minimal physical exertion, regular monitoring, and most importantly, a stress-free environment. She emphasized the last words pointedly. By morning, the hospital social worker had visited, helping me understand my options and connecting me with resources for women in crisis situations. When James finally appeared in my hospital room doorway, looking rumpled and uncertain, the social worker was still there reviewing housing assistance programs with me. Can we have a moment? He asked, glancing nervously at the social worker and Sophia. That's up to Mia, Sophia replied coolly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the mere sight of him. It's fine. I need to talk to my husband anyway. When we were alone, James approached the bed cautiously. How are you? How are the babies? We almost lost them. My voice was flat, emotionless. The doctor says the stress and exposure triggered preterm labor. If Sophia hadn't gotten me here quickly, our daughters might have been born last night, with only a 50% chance of survival. The color drained from his face. I never thought... That's the problem, James. You never thought about us at all. I adjusted myself in the hospital bed, the movement making the monitor strapped to my belly shift. Where were you while I was sitting in the rain, having contractions, still standing in your mother's house, watching me leave? He had the decency to look ashamed. I was packing a bag. I was going to follow you, but by the time I got outside, you were already gone. No, I corrected him. I saw you in the upstairs window as Sophia drove me away. You weren't packing. You were watching me leave. His shoulders slumped. Mia, I'm so sorry. I handled everything wrong. I should have stood up to Mom immediately. Yes, you should have. I looked down at my hands, noticing my wedding ring catching the harsh hospital lighting. But you didn't. Not last night, not any of the days before when she was slowly destroying me in that house. I'll make it right, he promised. I've told Mum that what she did was unacceptable. I'm looking for an apartment today. We can be on our own, just the 2 of us, 4 of us, like we planned. I studied his face, the face I'd loved and trusted. All I saw now was weakness, a man caught between two women, unwilling to make the hard choice until crisis forced his hand. "It's too late for that," I said quietly. "I nearly lost our babies because you couldn't choose between your mother and your wife. I won't put myself or our daughters in that position again." "What are you saying?" His voice cracked. "I'm saying I'm not coming back, James. Not to your mother's house and not to you. When I leave this hospital, I'm going to stay with Sophia until I can find a place of my own. But the babies are my priority," I finished firmly. "They need a mother who's healthy and strong. I can't be either of those things with you anymore." He tried to argue, to persuade, to promise changes. But something had fundamentally broken between us. Trust, respect, the belief that he would protect his family when it mattered most. After 30 minutes of circular conversation, a nurse came to check my vitals and asked James to leave. "Your blood pressure is rising again," she noted with concern. "You need to stay calm for the babies." James reluctantly left, promising to return the next day. As the door closed behind him, I felt an unexpected sense of relief wash over me. The following week was a blur of medical appointments, difficult conversations, and practical arrangements. I was discharged from the hospital after 3 days, moving directly into Sophia's spare room. The doctor had been clear, absolute minimal stress for the remainder of my pregnancy. With Sophia's help, I contacted a lawyer who specialised in family law. "I don't want to keep James from his children," I explained during our consultation. "I just need to protect myself and the twins from his mother's influence." The lawyer, a forthright woman named Diane, took detailed notes of everything that had happened. "Given the circumstances of your departure and the medical consequences, we have grounds for an emergency protective order if necessary," she advised. "But let's start by establishing clear boundaries and expectations." A week after the hospital stay, I returned to Evelyn's house with a police escort to collect my belongings. James wasn't home, deliberately I suspected, but Evelyn watched stone-faced from the doorway as I gathered my clothes, personal items, and the few baby things I'd purchased myself. "You won't keep my son away from me," she said as I was leaving, "and you won't keep my grandchildren from me either." "Tian." I looked at her, this woman who had caused so much pain and felt nothing but pity. "You did this, Evelyn, not me." With my things relocated to Sophia's apartment, I turned my attention to creating stability for myself and my unborn daughters. My employer was understanding about my situation, allowing me to work entirely remotely. My mother wired money to help with the security deposit on a small one-bedroom apartment I found near Sophia's place. "I'm coming to stay when the babies arrive," she insisted during our daily calls. No arguments. My brother Ryan, with whom I'd had a strained relationship since our father's death, surprised me by driving 6 hours to help set up my new apartment. "Family shows up when it matters," he said, simply assembling the crib I'd purchased second-hand. Meanwhile, James oscillated between desperate attempts to reconcile and angry accusations that I was overreacting. "Mum has apologised," he claimed during one visit to discuss the divorce papers I'd had drawn up. "She's promised to respect our boundaries in the future." "An apology doesn't undo what happened," I replied, rubbing my expanding belly, "and her promises mean nothing when you've proven you can't enforce any boundaries with her." He looked wounded. "I'm in therapy now, Mia. I'm learning about codependency and enmeshment. I understand what was happening with Mum, and I'm working to change it." "I'm glad you're getting help, James. You should continue that work for yourself and for our daughters. But our marriage is over." As the weeks passed, my apartment slowly transformed into a home. Friends from work organised a baby shower, filling the nursery with essential items for the twins. My former college roommate, now a nurse, gave me a crash course in caring for newborns. Sophia came over nightly, helping me prepare freezer meals for after the birth and keeping me company during lonely evenings. Through it all, the babies continued to grow. Each prenatal appointment confirmed they were developing normally, despite the earlier scare. "You're doing everything right," my obstetrician assured me. "Just keep taking care of yourself and we'll get these little ones safely to the finish line." At 34 weeks, considered full term for twins, I went into labour naturally. Sophia drove me to the hospital, where the medical team was prepared for a potentially complicated delivery. James arrived shortly after having been notified as listed in my birth plan. "I want to be there," he'd pleaded during our last discussion about the birth. "I want to see my daughters come into the world." Despite everything, I couldn't deny him that moment. "You can be in the delivery room," I agreed. "But your mother is not to be anywhere in the hospital." The labour was long and difficult, eventually resulting in an emergency C-section when one of the twins showed signs of distress. James stood by my side through it all, holding my hand and offering encouragement. For those brief hours, we were united again in our concern for our daughters. Emma Rose came first, announcing her arrival with a strong cry that brought tears to my eyes. Lily Grace followed 2 minutes later, smaller and quieter, but equally perfect. As the nurses placed them on my chest for that precious first contact, I felt a love so powerful it took my breath away. "They're beautiful," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for bringing them into the world." In that moment of raw emotion, I could acknowledge what we once had, what might have been. "They're going to need both of us, James, just in different ways than we planned." The twins' first week was spent in the hospital. Standard procedure for C-section deliveries and multiples. I was recovering from surgery while learning to breastfeed 2 babies, an exhausting but rewarding challenge. James visited daily learning alongside me how to care for our daughters. On the 3rd day, a nurse came to my room looking uncomfortable. "There's a woman in the waiting area insisting on seeing the babies. She says she's their grandmother. We've told her only approved visitors are allowed, but she's becoming difficult." My heart sank. "Evelyn Hamilton," the nurse nodded. "She's demanding to see her son and the babies. Security is with her now." James, who had been holding Lily, looked up with alarm. "I told her not to come. I specifically told her to respect your wishes about the hospital." For once, I believed him. The frustration on his face seemed genuine. "I'll handle this," he said carefully, transferring Lily back to me. "You shouldn't have to deal with her right now." He returned 30 minutes later, his expression grim. "She's gone. I made it clear that if she doesn't respect our boundaries now, she won't have any relationship with the twins going forward." It was the first time I'd seen him truly stand up to his mother. A small step, but significant. "Thank you," I said simply. We settled into a tentative co-parenting routine after I brought the twins home. James visited 3 times a week, gradually learning how to care for 2 infants simultaneously. He was surprisingly good with them, patient with their cries, attentive to their needs, clearly falling in love with his daughters. One evening, as he prepared to leave after helping with bath time, he paused at the door. "I've signed a lease on my own apartment," he told me. "No roommates, just me. It's not far from here, about 15 minutes away." I nodded, genuinely pleased for him. "That's good, James. The girls will need a place to stay with you once they're a bit older." "Mom's not happy about it." A wry smile crossed his face. "She thinks I'm throwing away money that could be saved living with her, but I told her this isn't negotiable if she wants to be part of her grandchildren's lives." It was another small victory in his journey toward independence, one I could acknowledge without needing to rejoin that battle myself. Our divorce was finalised when the twins were 2 months old. We agreed to joint legal custody, with me having primary physical custody and James having regular visitation. The arrangement was flexible, focused on what worked best for Emma and Lily, rather than rigid schedules. Meanwhile, Evelyn's campaign to see her granddaughters escalated. She sent expensive baby gifts that I returned unopened. She tried contacting my friends to plead her case. She even showed up at my apartment once, only to find I wasn't home. "She's not giving up," James warned me after one particularly persistent attempt. "She's convinced herself that you're keeping the twins from her out of spite." "I'm protecting them," I corrected him. "The woman who threw their pregnant mother out into a storm doesn't get to play doting grandmother now that they're here." "I understand your position," he said carefully, "and I'm respecting it. But would you consider family mediation? Just to establish clear boundaries and expectations, my therapist suggested it might be helpful for everyone." I hesitated, thinking of my daughters. Would I be denying them a relationship with their grandmother out of my own hurt and anger? Was there a way forward that protected them while allowing some form of supervised contact? "I'll think about it," I finally said, "but only with a professional mediator present and only if she's willing to acknowledge what she did and take responsibility for it." James looked relieved. "That's all I'm asking, a chance to find a way forward." The mediation session was scheduled for when the twins turned 3 months old. I arrived with detailed notes about my concerns and boundaries, prepared to advocate for my daughter's well-being. James came alone, having driven separately from his mother to demonstrate his independence. Then Evelyn arrived, and the atmosphere in the room immediately tensed. She looked older somehow, the months of separation having left their mark on her face. But her eyes still held that calculating sharpness I remembered all too well. The mediator, a calm, experienced woman named Rita, established ground rules for our discussion. We're here to find a path forward that prioritizes the well-being of Emma and Lily, she emphasized. This requires honesty, respect, and a willingness to acknowledge past behaviors. For the first hour, we discussed the events leading to our current situation. James spoke with surprising clarity about the toxic dynamics in his relationship with his mother. I explained my perspective on Evelyn's behavior during my pregnancy and the traumatic night of my expulsion from her home. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she started with what seemed like a prepared statement. I may have reacted emotionally during a difficult situation. She began, her voice carefully controlled. If Mia felt unwelcome in my home, that was unfortunate. The mediator interrupted gently. Evelyn, that sounds like what we call a non-apology. You're not actually taking responsibility for specific actions or acknowledging the harm caused. Evelyn's facade cracked slightly. What do you want me to say, that I was wrong to protect my son from a marriage that was clearly causing him distress, that I should have silently watched while she turned him against his family? Mother, James said sharply, that's not what happened and you know it. What followed was 2 hours of circular conversations with Evelyn, alternating between tears, accusations, and brief moments of seeming insight. The mediator skillfully guided us back to the central issues each time Evelyn attempted to rewrite history or shift blame. Finally, after yet another deflection, I'd had enough. Evelyn, I said directly, do you understand that your actions nearly caused me to lose my pregnancy? That your grandchildren almost died because you threw their mother out into a storm? She blinked momentarily, silenced. Then, to my astonishment, she slid from her chair onto her knees in front of me. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Please let me see them. They're my only grandchildren. I'll do anything. I'll apologize however you want me to. I'll attend therapy. Just don't keep them from me forever. The room fell silent. James looked as shocked as I felt. The mediator watched carefully, making no move to intervene in this unexpected development. I studied the woman kneeling before me, the woman who had caused me so much pain, who had nearly cost me my daughters. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to say. Get up, Evelyn, I said calmly. Begging doesn't solve anything. It certainly doesn't undo the harm you've caused. She rose unsteadily, confusion replacing the calculation in her eyes. I'm not keeping the twins from you out of spite or revenge, I continued. I'm protecting them from someone who has shown she's willing to harm their mother to maintain control over their father, someone who views them as possessions rather than people. That's not true, she protested weakly. It is true, James interjected. Mum, you've never seen Mia as a person with feelings and rights. You've only seen her as an obstacle between you and me. Evelyn's face contorted with sudden anger. After everything I've done for you, I gave up my life to raise you after your father died. I sacrificed everything, and this is how you repay me, siding with her against your own mother. The mediator leaned forward. Evelyn, that response is very telling. You're viewing your relationship with your son as transactional. You sacrificed, therefore he owes you loyalty regardless of circumstances. This is ridiculous, Evelyn snapped, grabbing her purse. I won't sit here being analysed by strangers while my son betrays me and this woman keeps my grandchildren from me. As she stood to leave, she pointed a finger at me. You haven't heard the last of this. Grandparents have rights too. I'll take you to court if I have to. The threat hung in the air as she stormed toward the door. What she didn't realise was that the mediator had been recording the session with our consent, recording her threats, her refusal to take responsibility, her emotional manipulation of her son. Evelyn, I called after her, my voice steady. If you pursue this legally, that recording will be evidence of exactly why you shouldn't have unsupervised access to the twins. Think carefully about your next steps. She froze, hand on the doorknob, then left without another word. The silence she left behind felt like a weight lifted from the room. James ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. I'm sorry. I really thought she might be ready to take responsibility. My therapist warned me she might not be, but I wanted to believe she could change. The mediator closed her notebook. This wasn't a failure. It was clarifying. You both now have a clearer understanding of what you're dealing with, and that's valuable information for moving forward. As we left the mediation centre, James walked me to my car. I won't push for her to have access to the twins, Flynn, he said quietly. Not unless she gets help and demonstrates real change. I touched his arm lightly. Thank you for standing up for us today. It matters that the girls have a father who can protect them even from his own mother when necessary. He nodded, a mixture of sadness and resolve in his eyes. I'm learning. Too late for us, but hopefully not too late for them. 1 year after that stormy night, when everything changed, I sat in the sunny backyard of my new rental house watching Emma and Lily play on a colourful blanket. Emma, the determined one, was already trying to pull herself up on the edge of their play table, while Lily contentedly stacked blocks only to knock them down with a delighted giggle. "They're getting so big," my mother commented, bringing out a tray with lemonade. She had moved closer 6 months ago, finding an apartment just 20 minutes away to be near her only grandchildren. "I can hardly believe they're one already," I agreed, smiling as Lily offered me a slightly drool-covered block. "Thank you, sweetheart. Is this for me?" The journey to this peaceful moment had been difficult but ultimately healing. After the failed mediation, Evelyn had indeed consulted a lawyer about grandparents' rights, only to discover that her case was extremely weak given the circumstances. The recording from the mediation session, which captured her threats and inability to acknowledge harm, effectively ended her legal pursuit. James, true to his word, had continued therapy and established his own life independent of his mother's influence. He had been promoted at work, found a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with a nursery for the twins, and even started dating occasionally, always careful to keep these relationships separate from his time with his daughters until they became serious. Our co-parenting relationship had evolved into something respectful and functional. We maintained a shared digital calendar for the twins' appointments and milestones, communicated openly about their development, and presented a united front on important decisions regarding their care. Evelyn had eventually moved across the country to live near her sister, apparently unable to bear witnessing James' independent life and relationship with his children that didn't centre around her. She still sent birthday and Christmas gifts for the twins, which I no longer returned but carefully inspected before allowing into our home. "Do you ever regret it?" my mother asked suddenly, interrupting my thoughts. Ending the marriage. I watched my daughters playing secure and happy despite the turmoil of their early existence. "No," I answered honestly. "I regret that it came to that point. I regret that James couldn't be the partner I needed when it mattered most. But I don't regret creating this safe, peaceful life for the girls." My mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. She had supported me through every step of this journey, from those first frightening nights in Sophia's spare room to helping me establish this new home for her granddaughters. "You've built something beautiful here," she said, gesturing to encompass not just the physical space, but the life I'd created. "Your father would be so proud." The mention of my father brought a familiar ache but also warmth. Emma's middle name, alias after him, ensured his memory lived on in my daughter. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway announced James's arrival for the twins' birthday celebration. We had agreed to co-host a small party inviting just close friends and family to celebrate this milestone. "Dada," Lily exclaimed, hearing his voice as he came through the house to the backyard. Emma immediately began crawling at top speed toward the sound. James appeared at the back door carrying a large bag of wrapped gifts and wearing a party hat that made both twins burst into laughter. He scooped up Emma, then crouched to kiss Lily's forehead. "Happy birthday, my beautiful girls," he said, his voice full of genuine joy. As I watched them together, I felt grateful for the man James was becoming. A father who put his daughter's needs first, who was learning to establish healthy boundaries, who showed up consistently and lovingly in their lives. The man I'd once believed him to be, perhaps. When he'd settled the twins with their new toys, James joined me on the patio. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his expression serious. "I received a letter from Mom yesterday." I tensed slightly. Evelyn was rarely a bearer of good news. "She's been in therapy for 6 months, he continued. Her therapist suggested she write letters as part of her recovery process. This one was addressed to you." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table between us. "I haven't read it. It's yours to open or not whenever you feel ready." I stared at the envelope, my name written in Evelyn's distinctive handwriting. "Thank you for telling me," I said, making no move to pick it up. James nodded, understanding my hesitation. "No pressure. She's trying, I think. Really trying this time, but that doesn't erase what happened, and you don't owe her forgiveness or a relationship." His growth over the past year sometimes still surprised me. The ability to see his mother clearly while still loving her, to acknowledge the harm she had caused while hoping for her healing. Later, after the birthday cake had been demolished and tiny hands thoroughly washed of frosting after friends had departed and the twins were peacefully napping, I sat alone with the unopened letter. Did I want to know what Evelyn had to say? Would her words bring closure or simply reopen old wounds? I traced my finger over the sealed edge, considering. Perhaps someday I would read it. Perhaps someday I would be ready to hear whatever acknowledgement or amends she had to offer. But not today. Today was for celebrating my daughters and the beautiful life we had built from the ashes of a difficult beginning. I placed the letter in a drawer for later consideration and went to check on my sleeping girls. Standing in the doorway of their room, watching their peaceful breathing, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. We had weathered the storm, literally and figuratively. We had found shelter in unexpected places and built strength from vulnerability. Most importantly, we had created boundaries that protected our peace even when others found those boundaries shocking. Emma stirred slightly, her tiny hand reaching out unconsciously for her sister. Lily responded in sleep, fingers curling around her twins. Even in slumber, they had each other, a bond that would sustain them through whatever challenges life might bring. I had kept my promise from that rainy night to protect them, to provide them with the stable, loving home they deserved. In doing so, I had also protected and rebuilt myself, discovering strengths I never knew I possessed. The road ahead would have its challenges. There would be co-parenting decisions to navigate, boundaries to maintain, and eventually age-appropriate conversations with the twins about their family history. But I faced that future with confidence, knowing that we had already overcome the hardest part. Some people might never understand why I couldn't simply forgive Evelyn and allow her unrestricted access to her grandchildren. They might see my boundaries as harsh or unforgiving. But those who had witnessed the journey, who had seen the physical and emotional toll of that stormy night, understood that these boundaries weren't about punishment. They were about protection. True healing sometimes requires distance. True forgiveness doesn't always mean restored relationship. And true family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by love, respect, and consistent care. As my daughters grew, I would teach them these truths. I would show them through example that they never had to accept mistreatment from anyone, even family, that they were worthy of respect and entitled to establish boundaries that kept them safe and whole. That lesson, more than any material possession or advantage, would be my greatest gift to them. The knowledge that they could weather any storm, that they could rebuild from any destruction that they could create, lives of peace and joy on their own terms. Have you ever had to establish shocking boundaries to protect your family's well-being? How did others react when you finally stood your ground? Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found strength in this story, subscribe for more real-life journeys of resilience, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your peace, even when that decision shocks others. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings.